Hey there, my name is Dan. I work for Newport Festivals Foundation. I'm here at the Newport Jazz Festival with three members of the Nate Smith team, I guess is how I will begin by introducing you. And we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to build a team in the music industry and how to set yourself up for success when you're talking about bringing people together to help you out in your career. So why don't we just begin by having you guys each sort of introduce yourselves, and we can start with you, Chris.
Sure. My name is Chris Weller. I'm a booking agent and manager at Big Fish Booking Company.
I'm Nate Smith. I'm a recording artist, touring musician, working in partnership with Big Fish, represented by them.
I'm Ryan Anderson. I'm a booking agent at Big Fish.
Cool. So why don't we just start off with some clarifications too, some vocab. You've got booking agent and manager. Those were the two terms that I heard there. So do you want to just quickly define what a booking agent is, what a booking agent does?
Yeah, a booking agent, I guess when you strip it down, is not just negotiating deals and fees for shows, but also planning routing, planning strategy on the rooms that you're going to play, building relationships between the agency, the artist, and venues. So there's a couple of different levels to it, but the simplest way to put it would be getting Nate live work.
Cool. Okay. And then how about management?
Management can be a lot of things. It really depends, but more than anything, it's kind of like part of it is administration, kind of fine-tuning details, keeping track of schedules and itineraries for things, but also just like general career management, negotiating deals and fees and collaborations and, anything in between.
Cool. So Nate, I guess we'll start from the beginning. You obviously were a musician before you brought on this team. How long did you go kind of managing it all yourself, doing everything on your own?
Oh, I started, so I had a couple of different bands before my current band, Kinfolk. I had a couple of things, and I was booking small gigs in New York. I was playing locally, reaching out to clubs around town, doing that myself from about maybe 2013 through 2018. Okay. And as my career, my visibility started to increase and expand, it became a lot more than I could deal with on my own, I reached out to Chris and we started to talk about it, and we ended up kind of starting with, I think we started with just the booking thing at first, and then we expanded into management.
How did you meet Chris? How did you know
I think it was Craig Taborn.
Oh,
so
really?
Craig Taborn, I was in Europe.
I never knew. Okay.
And this is the origin story. I was in Europe. We were in Frankfurt Airport, and I bumped into Craig Taborn. He was like, "Yeah, man, how's your band going?" I was like, "Man, it's cool. I'm doing it all myself. It's really hard." And he was like, "Man, you should contact Chris Weller, Big Fish," because I think you guys had already been working with Dave King.
Yeah, we were working with Dave.
Okay, so you had a little bit of a career. You were managing bands already, or were you?
And we were mostly booking.
You were mostly booking at that point.
At that time, yeah.
Okay, cool. And then when did you come into the picture?
I came in, I've been with Big Fish since 2018.
Okay.
So I was there when Nate came on.
Awesome. Okay. So I think one of the interesting questions that we can help musicians to answer if they're watching this video and thinking, when do I bring on an agent? When do I bring on a manager? When do I bring on people to help me? Because there's a fine line between someone helping me and someone exploiting me for the wrong reasons. Right. So it sounds like you were starting to get a little overwhelmed by the work. So that's probably one signifier.
For sure. It was, there's so much that goes into getting a musician from where they are, where they're based, to a stage, and then taking that musician from stage to stage to stage, city to city to city. There's so many details that have to be sort of worked out. And it can leave, and not only that, not only between the musician and the venue or promoter, but also the musician and the bandmates too, and the whatever crew they're traveling with. So there's a lot of just, a lot of communication that, as a creative person, it might be difficult to manage all of that and still manage the music. So I think for me, it was like 2018, the Kinfolk record had come out in 2017. We were starting to get work. And I had been sort of just reaching out to people cold, just saying, "Hey, I've got my band. I'd like to come to Europe. I'd like to come wherever." And
you were reaching out to promoters.
I was reaching out to promoters myself. I was just emailing them, and and I was having some success with it. But I also realized too that, it's good to have people representing you who have relationships with some of these presenters too, so that it's not just an artist reaching out cold and you may or may not get a response. You know, sometimes when there are well-worn relationships between promoters and booking agents, it can make the process a little faster, you know.
Sure. Yeah, I'd imagine both of your jobs are, and all three of you really are a lot about relationships. It's about having a relationship with someone that when you call, they actually want to listen and hear what you have to say.
Yeah, definitely.
And were you nervous at the beginning about like I'm gonna reach out to someone and sort of let them in on my creative world? Are they gonna take advantage of me, or were you just kind of like, I gotta do this, I'm gonna go for it?
It was something where I was a little nervous about it, but I wasn't nervous about being necessarily exploited or whatever. I was just worried about, when you're in control of something yourself and you're accustomed to doing everything yourself, it can be hard to like sort of relinquish that control or delegate that responsibility.
Sure. That's the truth, yeah.
And so, trusting someone to sort of follow through on the stuff. And what I noticed when I started working with Chris and Tina and Ryan was like, things started to move very quickly. And I realized, okay, so there is a team at work here, and I can see that they have a very sort of well-oiled machine.
Yep.
And it really helped to sort of accelerate things for me,
Chris and Ryan, so how do you guys work together? Are you having weekly meetings, daily meetings where you're talking about are you talking about just like the next gig? Or are you talking about higher level stuff? Like, how does that all work?
Yeah, I mean, all of it really. I guess prior to the pandemic, we were all at the kitchen table the majority of the time, and it was, we still have meetings. We talk maybe too frequently every day. Probably, but I mean, we talk about, whenever we can now, and I have a child, and that's a whole other thing. But, we have meetings about routing for artists, what like big picture things, all the way down to like, what presenters do we need to reach out to when, and what's coming this next season, and every other detail you can imagine.
It's multifaceted. So like somebody like Nate, right? I think on the one hand, okay, here's a period Nate's gonna go on tour. Like, we want these dates. It's not just like, okay, so then we just send a bunch of messages out and put Nate on the road. I mean, there's a lot of conversations about strategy. What should this tour look like? What does Nate want this tour to look like? There's a lot of decisions to be made. You might get 2 offers in a city, and you have to put them against each other. The whole team, all of us, have to kind of look at, well, what do these 2 plays mean? What's the look here? What are we going for? So on the one hand, it's like the nuts and bolts of Nate's going on tour. We're talking about dates. We're talking about deals. We're talking about backline. We're talking about routing. But on the other hand, all of those are also done with the idea of like, what is this doing to keep the career, like what's the career goal here? Because the career goal isn't just playing, like we're just endlessly playing shows.
Sure. There's got to be a larger ambition there.
And so how do all of these things relate? And I think there's a constant conversation about that.
Yeah.
I get the feeling that you guys are a little bit more integrated as a team. I've spoken to other agents, managers, artists, and there's almost like silos for some teams. Do you feel that? Do you feel like you're more integrated as a team, or is this pretty typical?
It feels like we're integrated because we talk all the time, I mean, we have our general roles just so that we can function well, and because you have to deal with bandwidth, let alone like creative bandwidth, which, which is why Nate started building a team. But then, I mean, we advise one another on pretty much everything. We discuss things as a team. I think there's a lot to benefit from talking about things as a team, as opposed to just like operating and then, stamping the timesheet and, on your own.
Right. And you guys have other artists that you work with too, right? So you've got a whole roster of people that you're thinking about. Do you have other artists that you work with together? Like, are you working with all of them together?
Yeah, pretty much just about everybody, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, we're a small team, so kind of our mentality is that we should both, all of us should be aware. Chris and I on the booking side, and there's a 13 with management. We try to all be aware of what we have going on at all times, because we're a small team. So if anything pops up and there's questions that need to be answered, we're all aware of what's happening.
Cool. And what do you look for, Nate, when you're looking for people? What sort of characteristics or traits are you looking for in people when you're trying to pick out your team?
Oh man, that's a great question. One of the things I really always dug about how Chris and Tina and Ryan do business is like the consistency with which we engage, the consistency with which we're talking about thinking ahead. Vision is very important too. Like you want to work with people who can see a few steps down, who have maybe the same vision for you that you have for yourself, or maybe are even seeing things you might not even see. It's always trickier looking from the inside out than from the outside in. So managers and booking agents can see fits for you in different cities or venues that maybe you don't see. You might not understand. Oh, well, how would that work? But then you play the show and it's like, oh yeah, that audience, there's an overlap there,
And this is a bit of a weird question to ask, but are you ever tempted when, do you ever look at another agency or another manager that has bigger clients and you're like, I want to get to another level, you know what I mean? Like, are you like Stevie Wonder's agent or like, Paul Simon, like, do you ever feel like are you trying to get to another?
That's actually what I was going to talk to these guys about. This is a grerit segue. Thank you for setting this up. I had a meeting earlier today.
That's right. Yeah.
No, so here's the thing. I'm lucky because I was a sideman for a long time before I started doing my own band leader thing. And I have seen artists fall for that. I've seen artists fall for Thundercats manager wants to man, but Thundercats on his roster. Thundercats the star of his show. When a lot of those larger agents, their superstar artists are going to be the ones that get all of the attention. So that I've noticed. It's like sometimes you think, okay, well maybe this lead to other things, and a lot of times I've seen people make lateral moves thinking that they're moving up because they get sort of seduced by the proximity to names. Oh yeah, I'm on the same thing as. But right. I think, man, what I've learned from the musicians I've worked with who've had long and very successful careers is you keep your team together. You keep your team together and you build. I play with a great singer-songwriter named Brittany Howard. Alabama Shakes. Yeah. Brittany Howard has had the same manager. Kevin Morris was in the van with them when they were playing bars, and now she's playing Madison Square Garden and he's there. So I just think that that's very important.
Last question I'll ask you: what advice would you two give to people that want to get into the industry, that want to start to sort of move up in the business?
As creatives or like as industry?
I think more industry side is the sort of, creative, I think people understand you start playing gigs, open mics, you eventually work your way up or whatever, or you join a band when you're in college. But I think the industry side is a little bit more confusing. Like, do you go to school for that? Do you just like try interning? What's the route that you'd recommend?
Route is tricky because there's a lot of different ways you can do it, but I think the most important thing is to understand the whole business. Understand what it's like to be a touring musician on the road. Our company's lucky we started with people who were all touring musicians. We know what it's like. We know how grueling the work is, and it's grueling. Like, tour is hard. Yeah. Owning a venue is hard. Being a promoter is hard. There's only so much money, and being an agent, being a manager. So have a grasp of all the pieces that go into this, because I think one of the things that's gotten really difficult in the music business lately is everybody exists business-wise in their own bubble. And they're never looking at the other side of the fence. So there are certain venues or there's some places have, I don't want to say it's an adversarial relationship because the relationships are really important. People have a good relationship, but I think to succeed on the industry side of things, the best thing you can do is have a really good understanding of the job that everybody is doing. From the sideman to the band leader to the bartender. Like, understand it.
Yeah.
That's great advice.
I think the perspective definitely helps us do what we do just so that we can advocate properly for artists. The other thing I would say is be a little bit fearless, especially if you're starting out. And don't be afraid of when people say no, but also just like, you kind of have to turn over every rock that you can to maybe find one inroad, to get a gig sometimes. And when we started, I probably spent hundreds of hours just doing research and things,
Turning
and
over rocks. And...
complete waste of time. But not wholly, because a lot of those contacts are great. But
Right.
you just have to figure it out and not be afraid, if that's what you want to do, to put the work in.
Awesome.
Also, I think it helps to talk to your friends, because they have contacts, they might have a network that can help you. Don't be afraid just to ask for help or advice or anything like that.
Never be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
That's a really good.
Yeah, most musicians and people in the industry are more than happy to spend 15 minutes, like you're doing right now, talking to people to help them out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't be fooled by Stevie Wonder.
On that note, all right, well, there's a lot of good music left to see here at the Newport Jazz Festival, so I'll let you guys go. I appreciate you taking the time, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you.